So look, a couple of things. I want to make sure I get something off my mind to get started here. We started Man Church. Kevin, Matt, there's a few men in the church that really felt led to get men together and, seek the kingdom, right? That's what we're here for tonight. I want to make no mistake about why we're here. You're going to hear my testimony, but, it's got nothing to do with me, okay? It's all about the kingdom. It's all about seeking His face. But I want to get this off my mind before I get started. The first one of these we had Jason Brewer in here, and we had all these PowerPoints going, and this guy's smart. So if you're expecting that, I might as well, somebody else can come up and speak real quick, all right? And then the second one we had, Doug mentioned it already. Well, this guy was in a biker club, Ryan, and I'm not that cool. I work for Lowe's, okay? So I just want to make sure we get that out of the way real quick. But when we talk about Man Church, we've been studying a curriculum. I guess we started about last year, right, Matt? About this a little bit before, right after Christmas. And hopefully all of you are involved in that. If you're not, I would highly encourage you to do that. We have every Sunday morning, Matt leads our class. We have another, I think Heath's in here somewhere. Heath, it's Wednesday night. Him and Nathan Beard lead a class, and then Jason Brewer, and I believe Kevin lead one on Sunday afternoon. So if you're not involved in this curriculum as a man, and the whole point of it is how to be a man, okay? We're in here on Man Night, but how do you be a man? And what we learned through, the first part of this curriculum is that we have to seek Jesus, and we have to know Jesus, and we must be saved if we really want to be a man, right? We went through a 40-week curriculum where we talked about things like integrity. We talked about compassion, surrender. I mean, there's several different traits that we went through. And I can tell you that I've been on a walk with Jesus now for some time, but my story's a little bit different. But during this curriculum, it really, really got to me and really made me a little bit more fired up to make sure that I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing as a man, okay? Currently in our class, we just got through studying Abraham. Nobody in here has been asked to, sacrifice your son. I mean, wow. The example that Abraham gives us, when you start looking at the men of the Bible, which is where the Man Church is heading next, right? We're currently studying Joseph. Joseph's brothers, what'd they do? They put him in slavery, right? Sold him to slavery. I mean, it's just some of the stuff that the examples that are in there. I mean, there's really just one way, and what I'm going to share with you guys tonight, being a part of that is it's a big deal to me. It's a big deal to my family. One of the things I want to make sure y'all get from me right away is that I wasn't raised in church, and that's probably what's going to make me a little bit different than a lot of you in here. I never met my dad. I know his name. I actually know where he lives. He lives in Tuscumbia, but to this day, I'm almost 50 and I've never met him, okay? My mom was a drug addict growing up. And when you talk about being, hard and how to be a man, I had to figure it out the hard way. Good old-fashioned work. I wanted to be better. That's the one thing I knew. I just wanted to be better for that, So a couple of things in my life. I'm going to show you a little illustration here that maybe you can kind of get what I'm coming from. A couple of things in my life and my walk with Jesus, and I'm going to get into my testimony in just a moment. But two things that really stuck with me as I began to study the Bible. I was saved, just so y'all know, around 17 years old, and I'll tell that story in just a moment. But a couple of things that really stood out to me is this. One, we have to seek Jesus' face every single day. And that's something that I've strived to do, and we all fall short. I get that. I've done that. We all do that. But that's something that's important to me. When you think about Man Church and the verse that really you look at all of it's Luke 9:23. And what does it say? It says, deny self, take up your cross and follow me when? Not tomorrow, not next month, not next year, every single day. So this whole thing about being a man and how to be a man, that's where it starts, okay? And then for me, I cannot get this image out of my head. And I want to make sure I share this because it's just something that's really stood out to me in my life. as I've moved all over the place, which you'll find out in just a moment. So I have this vision where, Jesus is standing right here. Every one of us on that day are going to stand before him. And what I don't want anybody in here, or anybody that anybody the world, the last thing that we can hear is, "Depart from me, you workers of iniquity, for I never knew you." That's why I'm up here tonight. I'm not a speaker. I fall short. Matt's heard a lot of my stories. I love my class, and I highly encourage you to come to it. What I want to hear is, if you can just imagine, take yourself to a place that you're standing there and you see Jesus face to face, and you hear him say, "Well done, my good and faithful servant." That's what we should be striving to do, okay? So what I want to do here is, you might be, what's this rope doing up here, right? I want y'all to think about this rope. Now, it's obviously not very long, but imagine that it's endless. It goes on forever and ever. It goes around the world 4 times, however you want to look at it. Now think about the fact that this is your existence, okay? Everybody here is going to exist forever. Now I want you to think about this right here. That's our time on earth right here. All right? And it's funny to me because, Doug, everything that we do in this lifetime, it's like, I got to get this done. I got to get up and go to work. It's all this stuff that pulls us away. But when we get to right here, this little part right here, when we stand in front of Jesus, what we do in this time is where we're going to spend the rest of our existence. Think about that for a minute. And that's something it really stands out to me how important that is. Matt, I sit here and I think about this. Let me just think about that for a minute, right? We work as men, and we get about right here somewhere, and we saving money. We try and do all this so that we can retire right here, that last little bit. It doesn't matter. Everything that we do on this earth does not matter, except for one thing: seeking his face and hearing him say, well done, my good and faithful servant. Can we all agree to that? So, this whole existence thing, we get wrapped up in it. And, it's one or two places. And my hope is that we seek his face. So what I want to do is I want to kind of get into just my story a little bit, because like I said, I just work for Lowe's. I mean, I don't know why y'all got me up here. Paul Crawford, where you at, Paul? 25 years ago, I joined this church. He probably don't want me to say this, but I was in his Sunday school class, and I remember he would call on me to pray. I mean, as a new Christian, can I call out sick today? But I want to thank you, Paul, for challenging me to pray in front of our class, to do some of the things that we did as a class. That really kind of helped shape and mold me as I went through my life, and you're a big part of that, whether you know it or not. So let's go back to what you came here for, just to hear my testimony. We had all these PowerPoints. Kevin's like, "Listen, man, just get up there and tell your story." We did worship music the first 2. We did all these PowerPoints, and I'm like, man, they really set me up for success up here. So we're not doing any of that. So I mentioned to you, I'm gonna share a couple of pieces. I really struggled with what all I wanted to share, because I've honestly been through so much in my lifetime. I just had to get to a place where finally I just said, God, just speak through me, because I just want to connect with those that I can. So 8 years old, I want to share this story because it kind of stands out to me. I mentioned already I never met my dad. By the time I was 8 years old, I think I was on my 4th stepdad. Life, like I said, it was pretty rough. Drug infested, things like that. I remember when we moved to Elgin, Alabama, and behind the house that we moved into, there was a little white church. And for those of you that are here that grew up in church, you probably can't even comprehend what I'm going to share with y'all tonight, okay? But I remember, and this is important for y'all to hear me say, okay? I would look out my window at that little white church. I see it clear as day, Doug. And I remember thinking to myself, I'm not good enough to go in there. My little elementary mind had convinced me that I can't go there. All right. Meanwhile, at 8 years old, in my closet, we had marijuana growing all in the closet, in my closet, my bedroom. I remember smelling that. I remember what it smelled like. I remember the smoke, the alcohol, the drugs that were all in my house. And, that was kind of what I grew up in. And, when you grow up in that, that's just kind of what you know. It's just what you do. It's what you get used to. So, from 8 years old, that's kind of the environment I was in. I remember my stepdad at the time, if I'd get in trouble, which seemed to be every day, he would make me put boxing gloves on and literally would beat me to death. I mean, pretty much I went to the hospital I don't know how many times just for doing nothing. Wasn't even my dad. I can tell you another story down the road, but I don't have time for tonight where I got him back. But, yeah. Fast forward it to 12 and 14 years old, literally for 2 years straight, I pretty much had a free-for-all situation. Not having a dad, my mom never knew where I was at. I could do whatever I wanted to do, literally. I was driving a car around when I was 13 years old. Don't tell nobody that now, but 12 to 14 years old, I had a friend of mine at the time, I'd call him a friend, but every Friday night his mom would buy us alcohol. And we would go to his house. It started out me and him and a couple other guys. And literally every Friday night, we would drink and drink and drink and throw up. I learned how to funnel and how to play quarters when we started drinking whiskey and started drinking vodka and you name it. And this went on for 2 years. By the time I was 14, that little group of 4 or 5 people ended up being 40 and 50 people. And it was every weekend. That's what I look forward to. But you guys got to remember, I never opened a Bible. The devil had already told me, I'm telling you, it was all the devil. I know it now, that I wasn't good enough to go in that little white church. So that was my way. That was how I coped with it. Well, the guy's dad came home one night from work. He worked third shift. And when he came home, we were all, doing stuff we shouldn't do. And they got a divorce, and that really impacted me. I remember that, and I thought, wow, that we weren't supposed to be doing this. that was my mentality. I know that seems silly, but that's where we were at. You fast forward a little bit further, and I mentioned my mom a few times. I love my mom. I want to make sure I'm clear on that. And today, she doesn't do drugs. She doesn't do any of that, and it's part of the reason why I'm glad to be back home. I've got a pretty good relationship. There's a lot of resentment, things like that, but so don't misunderstand what I'm saying. She's my mom, okay? Man church, Matt will tell you this. I left one day tore up, didn't I? And since then, I've really been, that's been the difference. Man church was a big difference for me. But anyway, think about what all I've told you so far, and I've left out so much, okay? You can't understand the things that I've done, things that I've seen. But think about this. 15 years old, I'm an expert driver. I'm an expert alcoholic. You name it, I've done it at that point. My mom comes to me, and she did tattoos for a living. That's how we paid the bills. She did tattoos, very good at it. She said, I'm gonna move out to California. This was one summer. I was 15 going into 16. It would have been my 10th grade year. She said, Jason, I'm gonna move to California, do tattoos for the summer, and I'll be back by the time school starts back. Well, of course, a kid like me that doesn't know any better, see you later. Then it become a party at our house every week. That was my lifestyle. When she left, she told me, you pay the utility bill, you pay the water bill, I'll pay the trailer payment. We lived in a trailer. So the trailer payment was like $110 a month, something like that. And of course, for me, I was like, that's great. I'd already worked. I worked for fishermen, doing different side jobs. I started working early because I wanted to have things that I didn't have. Well, fast forward to the end of that summer, I never heard from my mom. Well, so for some of you younger people in here, we didn't have cell phones. okay? You had to call somebody. You had to literally go pick it up off the wall and, call somebody, all right? And as a matter of fact, if they were out of state, you had to do a collect call, and you had to pay for that. Well, I never heard from her. Fast forward to November, I get a phone call. It was a weird number. We didn't have caller ID that I can remember. I answered it. I was at home, and they said, "We need to speak to Teresa." And that's my mom. I said, "Well, she's not here." And, at this point, I didn't know what she was doing. I had no idea. And they said, well, who are you? And I said, "Well, I'm her son." And he said, "Well, I'm sorry to tell you this, but we're coming to repossess your trailer." And I thought to myself, what am I going to do? I have a sister. She was already out of the house, a lot like my mom. And I remember sitting there, at that time I was 16, and I remember sitting there thinking to myself, I don't know what I'm going to do. And what I ended up doing is I had a pistol laying beside me, and was about to take my life. And that's what, for me to stand up here today, there's a lot of things that have happened in my life that I'm thankful for, because I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for a couple of people in my life. Which is why it's important for all of you to be here tonight and be there for people that are in need, because you never know what people are going through. Whether they're raised in church, not raised in church, it doesn't matter. Life is hard, and we've all come to, I know everybody here has experienced that. We're promised trial and tribulation. It doesn't mean that we might get to it. Everybody here has either been through it, gonna go through it, or currently going through it. But I was sitting there and, had nothing, nobody. The phone rings, and, I sit there, it kept ringing. I was just zoned out is all I can remember. And it kept ringing, and I got it, picked it up, and it was a friend of mine, and he could hear my voice, and he said, "What's wrong?" And he came over immediately, and he said, What do you need? What's going on? And I told him, I need like $1,200 to pay off our house, or I'm not going to have a place to live. And anyways, long story short, his mom and dad gave me that money. I was able to take care of that, kept paying the bills. But 16 years old, I had to grow up and be what I thought a man pretty quick, okay? But I'm thankful for that phone call, because guys, I'm telling y'all, I was at a really bad place, because I didn't know Jesus. I didn't know, I was not good enough to be in church, and that was all I knew. So when you hear people say things like, "I can't believe they would do that," or "I just don't understand that," if you're not in your Bible every day and you're not raised in a Christian household, I can tell you it's very easy to understand, because the devil's telling me that whole time I'm not good enough. That's all I ever thought of. When I turned 16 in July, so by that time, that was about November, I had been working at Foodland in Elgin. And I want to back up a minute, because this is really important. The store manager at Foodland, his name was Steve, and I'll leave it at that. Every single day I would go to work. He knew my mom. She shopped there. It's a small town, if you know where Elgin's at. He knew my situation, and every single day he would say something about Jesus. Every single day. And of course, what did I tell you already? I wasn't good enough for that. So I ignored it every time. I'm telling you, I was too far gone. Every day. So you fast forward to that moment that I'm standing there about to take my life, and that phone rings. The next day I went to work and I sought him out. You see, Steve was planting that seed for Jesus to take hold of my life that whole time. He knew exactly what I was going to go through, how it was going to happen, and by the grace of God, I'm still here. So, Steve began to, we began to go to, I'd go to his house, and he would do Bible studies with me. And we would, over and over again, and I was saved. Not by Steve, but Jesus saved me. One night, his house, I gave my life. And I'm going to tell you, the whole time that I thought I wasn't good enough, and I had this image of people that went to church were perfect, it was when Steve told me This is how I was illiterate. I'm just telling you, it's my elementary mind would work when you're a non-believer. I would tell myself I'm not good enough. And when he told me, I'll never forget it, that Jason, nobody's perfect. And that's the reason why Jesus died for us. It was at that moment a light bulb went off in my head. I can go to that little white church. I can be different. I can be changed. And I'm going to tell you, up to about 16 years old, Dwayne, you hear me say this. This is my wife's dad sitting right down here. He may not know any of this stuff. I don't know if he did. He probably wouldn't let me date his daughter. But I will tell you that I couldn't say a sentence without cussing. I couldn't go 2 days without drinking. Stealing, you name it. I was watching pornography. My mom at 8 years old, I remember hearing noises and I'd see pornography in there on the TV. My mom would be watching with a bunch of people. And I would sneak in there and I got introduced to that really quick. And all it is the devil, guys. It's all it is. So, you fast forward, I was saved. I worked at Foodland all that time. I ended up going to work for Walmart. I'll try to fast forward through a good bit of this stuff, but God's taken me on a journey since that time. I can tell you that I immediately stopped cussing. I haven't drank anything since I was 17, but I will tell you, I had drank enough by the time I was 16. I was pretty good, But I haven't drank, I haven't smoked, I haven't cussed, none of that this whole time. God changed me immediately because I figured out that I have hope. And when I met my wife, we worked at Walmart together, and it was just kind of meant to be. I never knew my dad. My mom wasn't much growing up, and all I could think about is I wanted to be the best dad that I could be. That was in the early stages of my Christianity. It was about being a good worker. It was about being, the best dad. And early on, all I cared about, that little short, that red piece of tape back there that I put on that rope, it was all about them. And even though I would go to church, and even though I would, read my Bible and things like that, my focus wasn't right. But I will tell you, after being married 2 years, we had Jordan, who's my oldest. Blake's sitting right here. That's her husband. I didn't like him at first, but he's all right. I would go to work at 5 a.m. and I would work till 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And then Jackie would go to work after that because I had trust issues. You can imagine, I didn't want anybody keeping my kid because what if they were in the household I grew up in, right? So it was just important to us. We didn't do it, but we prayed every day. Every day we prayed. Something happened where she could stay home. Please, something happened. 8 months later, I get a phone call. Jason, I need you to come work with me in North Carolina. And I was like, man, I don't really care because I don't know anybody here. I don't have any family. But for Jackie, it was hard. And, Kevin, I prayed about it for 8 months. So what do? You go. Hardest decision I ever made was to move out of here. We went. And I'll just say this, fast forward, I'm going to share a couple of quick stories because I think they're important. But you fast forward, I moved to North Carolina 23 years ago. From North Carolina, I went to Montgomery, to Birmingham, to Atlanta, to Mobile, Gulf Shores, Dothan, back to Montgomery, Memphis, Nashville, Madison, Florence, Alabama. What'd you say? Amen. I have been trying to get back home for 23 years. And, along the way, I want to share a couple of stories because I truly, in every city that we lived in, I want y'all to think about this. We had to meet all new coaches, my kids did, all new teachers. We had to meet new preachers. We had to go to a new church. We had to start a new workplace. I uplifted my kids every single time. I've run, in 20 years of being a store manager, just so y'all know, I am the store manager at Lowe's, which really, isn't cool like a biker club. But in the 20 years that I've been a store manager, I've ran 15 different stores, if that kind of puts it in perspective how much I've moved around. Most of those moves were with Target. I was a store manager for Target for almost 18 years. I've lived in cities like Montgomery and Memphis, as I mentioned, and they're not places you really want your kids to grow up, as you can imagine. There's a story, though, that I want to tell, because we prayed every time we moved. And as men, I think it's really important, because you never know what you're called to do. And I'm telling you, I'm the epitome of that. But every time we would move, our priority was Jesus. Our priority was to pick the church. And when we visited all the churches in there and decided, that's where we picked our house. And every time I coached, my goal was to hopefully, be an example for the kids that was around me. Every time I went to work, I would try to be an example for those men that were around me, boldly in my faith. You go to my office today, I got crosses, scripture all over. I don't care who says anything, that's my priority. We were in Millbrook, Alabama. I worked in Montgomery. And at that time, our kids were getting older, and we really loved it there. We loved our church. We loved our everything. You just say it. We loved it. And I had an opportunity. My boss wanted me to move to Memphis. And, the whole time that I left here, I was trying to get back closer to home. And he goes, I've already Googled it. It's like 30 minutes closer than Montgomery. I'm like, you want me to go to Memphis? I tell the joke all the time. To get out of Montgomery, I had to move to Memphis. So anyway, but we loved it there. And I remember telling Jackie we're moving to Memphis, and she said, oh, no, we're not. We're not this time. And, we prayed about it, just like we always did. And Jackie, you're going to lose your mind when you hear this. I'm not making this up. She said, Jason, it's going to take a burning bush, Jesus' face in fire, for me to go to Memphis. That was on a Friday night, Kevin. Saturday morning, this is no joke. I'm telling you, it gives me chills when I think about it today. Saturday morning, we're out working in the yard. A car pulls up in the front of our house. Let me make sure we're clear. There's no for sale sign. There's nothing like that. Guy rolls down his window and he says, hey, is your house for sale? And I looked at Jackie and I thought, maybe. I don't know. It might be. We go out there and my boss had just moved to Collierville, Tennessee. And his district office store at Target was there in the Collierville. If you're familiar with Memphis, that's where it was at. And so I thought, well, let's go do that. Let's see what they say. Well, the guy goes, well, my job is moving me here, and we're moving from Collierville, Tennessee. And I remember looking at Jackie, and I thought, oh my goodness, And I'm sitting here acting like nothing's going on. I'm like, yeah, okay, that's cool. I'm glad you're coming. And I looked at her again, and she just looked at me, and I said, it's for sale. Absolutely, it's for sale. You talk about a burning bush and prayer and making sure it was the right thing to do. When we got to Memphis, I've got to see my kids and my wife really do some cool things. Jordan, you may not know this, Blake, 9th grade, 15 years old, stood up at Fields of Faith at her high school, over 2,000 kids, and gave her testimony. And I remember sitting there thinking, man, I'd never do that. And, here I am. But that's pretty cool, right? I mean, what 15-year-old kid would do that? And you, as a dad that never was raised in church, I mean, man, I won, right? That's a win. Brody, you mentioned Brody. I'll share a quick example. Brody, we knew early on was going to be a pretty good baseball player. And we had to play travel ball because in league play, like, nobody could catch him. He's a left-handed pitcher. He threw a little bit harder than everybody else. But we never would let him play because we go to church on Sundays. That was just the rule. Like, we wasn't deviating from it. And you remember what we did, Dwayne? I had to put him on the travel ball team. But every coach that we moved around these cities and played for, the first conversation, Doug, I'd look at him and I'd say, look, I'd love for Brody to play for y'all, but he don't play on Sunday mornings. And every one of them would look at me and said, we'll take him. But that was a commitment we made. But you think about that, in Memphis, that we wasn't wanting to go to, his entire baseball team one Sunday afternoon after we won a tournament came and listened to him sing a solo at church through baseball. And he would probably really get mad if I told him he sung a solo, so y'all don't tell him that. But I mean, how cool is that? That's God working, right? And so through prayer, we just did what we were told to do. Every day that I go to work, I'm in a position now as a store manager that, I want to go back to Steve because I think that's really important. Steve did not give up on me. When we go out and witness, and you tell somebody one time about Jesus and we check a box, man, that's not good enough for everybody. It's not okay. And if we're going to get to that eternity and get past that red tape right there, we got to be better than that. And that's what Man Church is teaching me. And that's why I really encourage everybody to be a part of it. We left Memphis to go to Nashville, and in my mind, I thought, man, we're going to be an hour and 20 minutes from home. It's not Memphis. It's not Montgomery, Anthony. You know what I'm saying? I mean, it's Nashville. It's nice, no crime. And guess what we didn't do? We got so excited that we were getting to go close to home. It's the first move that we ever made through all that time that we didn't pray about it. All right? We moved to Nashville. Dwayne, what happened there? Jackie hated it. I hated it. We did everything wrong in that move, and we paid for it. We were miserable, couldn't be happy. You name it. And so it just goes to show, if you don't pray and your decisions aren't biblical, I'm telling you, the devil's going to put you in a different spot. And even though in my mind, my flesh was telling me, oh, that's where I'm going. I'm going to be there. But we didn't pray about it, and it was hard. And Matt, I ended up building a house in Elgin, back where I grew up, and I drove to Nashville every day, miserable. About 2-hour trip in traffic. I worked 15-hour days. And Matt probably remembers this in Sunday school, man. I was broke. And the men in that class, and Matt included, they started praying for me, and it really just kind of gave me that second hope. I can't do this on my own. And we made the decision. I left Target and went to work for Lowe's. Best decision I've ever made. And the reason I know I'm supposed to be here tonight, the reason I know that I'm supposed to be back home, I want to share 3 quick things I didn't share with you guys that's happened just in the last 2 weeks. Number 1, Harville Scales isn't in here, but is he in here? I didn't see you tonight, Harville, and I'm glad you're here. 20 years as a store manager. This is going to be emotional for me, okay? I'm going to try to get through this. 20 years as a store manager, I've lived my life trying to witness and be there for people that were lost, like Steve was for me. And it has nothing to do with what I'm about to say, but your son works for me at Lowe's in Florence. I transferred to Florence 2 weeks ago. I'm home. Hallelujah, thank God. You want to know what he did for me? Every store that I've ever taken over, I didn't know he was your son, by the way. I want to be clear on that. Every store that I've ever taken over, one of the first things I do is I go in and I have individual meetings with every manager that I have. And I make sure they know who I am. I make sure they know that I'm a man of God. I make sure that they know that I'm here to help them and support them in any way that I can. And I've prayed for so many people over the years at work with them, not knowing that they didn't know I was praying. Tyler was the first manager that I had a meeting set up with in Florence 2 weeks ago. And I shared my story about what, where I come from, why I'm doing what I'm doing. And he prayed for me right there in my office. In 20 years, Harville, I have never had anybody do that for me. I've been too busy doing it for everybody else. Now, I know people pray for me. Don't misunderstand, but I'm talking about in public. People say all the time, I'm going to pray for you. He did it right in front of me. And you have no idea how much impact, and the impact obviously you've made in his life. But man, I know I'm supposed to be in Florence, Alabama. That just made my day. A couple of days ago, y'all, I can't make this stuff up, okay? 2 days ago, I left work. Maddox has got to have a mouthpiece, spring training. I feel like all I'm doing is going to Academy buying stuff for the kids. I walk in and this guy goes, "Hey man, I just saw you at Lowe's." I was like, "Yeah, I just left work." He said, "Oh, you work over there?" I said, "Yeah, I do. I just got back home." And just through conversation, he just looked at me, Kevin, and he goes, "This might be awkward, but you go to church anywhere?" And I just kind of stood back and I said, "Dang, man, that's usually me." And somebody's asking me, am I going to church? And so just through conversation, we started talking about it. And his son has pretty much abandoned the faith. And he broke down kind of in front of me, and we talked about it, and I prayed for him right there because I shared a little bit about, I'm giving my testimony this Saturday, and I said, if you can get your son here, and I don't know if he is. If you are, I'd love for you to be. But I said, get him here. He needs to hear my story. Obviously, he's not here, but we'll keep praying for him. But just through that conversation, I mean, wow. And then he said, so what's your name? And I said, well, it's Jason Lentz. And he said, Lentz. He says, your daughter named Jordan? I said, yeah. Oh, she just took my daughter's pictures for, anyway. It's just a small world, right? But how many of you out in a store are willing to go up to somebody you don't know and say, hey, this may be awkward, but do you have a relationship with Jesus? Chris, where are you at? Chris Kilpatrick. You care if I share? Sunday school 3 weeks ago, it impacted me. Chris has got somebody he's working on, and this is something why you need to be in the class with Man Church. We are fired up, would you say that, guys, about seeking the kingdom, getting people to know Jesus. And Chris said something, and he said, this is what I told this guy. This may be awkward, but what's your relationship with Jesus look like? And I thought, man, that's a pretty good way to kind of start that conversation, Well, the guy at Academy said the same thing to me. I've never heard that. Anyway, it's just crazy. Today, this morning, I get a phone call. I'm the president of the HOA of my neighborhood. Please take it easy if you got an HOA. Take it easy on your president. It's not an easy job, okay? I get called to get an approval on some landscaping. Anyway, I go over there, and the guy says, yeah, my son, he works for Target. And I said, really? I said, what's his name? He said, Rusty Crosland. I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. I've known this guy the whole time I was at Target. I trained him. We would go to Minnesota. This is what he told me, and this is why this is important for me to share this, okay? And then I'll get to the end, I promise. He said, Jason Lentz, my son's talked about you. And I said, oh, really? When you hear that, you're like, what do you mean? And he said, you guys would go to Minnesota, and we had our annual meeting there every year. And I was there 16 years. 15 of those years, I won MVP of the whole region as a store manager, which is a proud accomplishment that I had. But one thing that he said, Rusty would say about me, because Rusty was the same way, when these store managers would go to these meetings, they would go out downtown and they would drink, they'd go to strip clubs. You can't even imagine what all they would do. And me and Rusty would sit in the hotel. And everybody would say, hey, let's go. I'm good. I want no part of that. And his dad today, this morning, said to me, that's what Rusty told me about you. What if I met him today and he said, man, I've heard stories about you going out drinking. You never know, right? Where the Lord's going to take you. And I just feel really cool about that what I've done and the choices I've made may have impacted somebody else. So anyway, it's all God. But I'll wrap it up with this right here. I want to make sure I didn't miss anything here. If you go back to Luke 9:23, I told you earlier, part of my story and as I got saved, and there's so many things I want to share, but I just don't have time to, and we can do that another time. But seeking his face, that image of standing in front of Jesus, and Matt's heard me say this a few times, I think, in Sunday school. It's just important to me, and it has to be important as men that we go out into our communities, we go out into our schools, go into the workplace, and if you can get up every morning and be in your Bible, and you think about Jesus and you think about what He's done for you, why would we not do that? It goes back to the rope, right? That little small piece, everything that we do in that little small piece of that rope is going to determine what our eternal life's going to be. Think about that for a minute. Luke 9:23. Here's what I want y'all to close your eyes, and I want y'all to think about something real quick. Today, everywhere you look around, you see crosses, right? Think about the cross. Even if you look in our baptism above it, you got this beautifully, it's wooden, it's carved perfectly, and that's the image that most people see. As a broken kid that never had a dad, which I do now, thank God, thank you, Jesus. I can't help to think every time I think about a cross. We just had Easter last week, and my cross in my mind is beaten up. I think about, the one that Jesus had. If you think about it, it had blood all over it. It was dragged. Jesus was beaten so bad that Simon had to carry the cross for him to get on that hill. He couldn't do it. Nobody in this room has had to wear a burden like that. But still, that image of that cross, that old rugged cross, is the image that I have. And when I get up every day, I think about what all Jesus did and what he had to go through. And you think even when he was nailed on that cross and all the blood stains, the sweat, imagine how it might stink. Keep your eyes on that cross, because when you see that beautiful one every day, it's a reminder. But my challenge to you is think about the cross that was there for us, for you, for me, for everybody. And I think if men can really, truly lead your families, go out into the workplace, go out into your schools, and we can have this vision of standing before Jesus one day and hear the words, well done, my good and faithful servant. That's when we win. Everything we do today does not matter unless it's getting us to that point.